Hello and welcome to my video, Jim's Rules of Writing. It's silly, I know. But it's an attempt to help you improve the quality of your writing on your assignments and even business communication. And I'd say the video is inspired from students. So I've just come up with some thoughts on techniques, tools, and processes that I use that might be helpful to you. Writing is a learned skill. Now, I'm not a good writer by my very nature. In fact, my training in computer science, undergrad and graduate, I've really just been more focused on science and math, frankly, technology. Much less so on writing, English, grammar, and history, those sorts of things. But my focus over the past 20 or so years in business has forced me to be a better communicator, a better writer. And I'm hoping that I can convey some of those ideas and thoughts to you in this presentation. One thing I can tell you is that writing is a skill that anyone can learn. If I can do it, you can do it. It takes a lot of effort to write well. No better time to start practicing than in this course. You see, the challenge is not to let your great ideas get lost, because the reader is getting focused on the errors, the grammar, the misspellings, the organizational problems, rather than your great content. What we really want to do here is to identify the common errors so we can fix these very correctable mistakes. So today in this video, we're going to cover what I consider are some pretty decent writing tools that I personally use every single day. We'll review the common writing errors that I've seen in assignments so far, and I'll point out some shortcomings that I've also seen when students are using references. I'll also touch on formatting. And lastly, I will share my personal writing process. I don't expect you to copy it per se, but if it gives you some ideas on how to improve your writing process, then mission accomplished. So believe it or not, I still get papers turned in with plain old simple spelling errors. And what that tells me is the student did not turn on spell checking, did not use Microsoft Word, or some other similar tool to do basic spell checking. And when you're writing discussion posts, for example, write in Microsoft Word, then copy and paste to your discussion post and improve the writing quality because you're using a better tool. Microsoft Word also has a reasonable grammar checker, so that's probably worth using Microsoft just for that alone. Now, one of my favorite tools to use is something called Grammarly. There is a free version and a paid subscription version. I've used both. I started with the free version for many years, and I've switched to the paid version a couple years ago because it's that good. And I would strongly encourage you to go use Grammarly or find something similar. I recommend Grammarly. I don't have any relationship with the company. I just find it to be a very, very good tool. If it's productive for me, it's probably going to be productive for you. And by way of example, I'll show you some Grammarly output of something that I'm currently writing. I'm the primary author of an 80-plus page EMPI toolkit for the California HIM Association. It's called CHIA. I went back in and did yet another edit on everything that we had corrected based on the peer review and the comments. And I found pages and pages and pages of things needed to be redone. Here are samples of my pages that illustrate recommendations from Grammarly on something I've edited many, many times. Any work you do should be edited several times according to the schedule that you have and the time permitting. It's never good just on the first draft. Never good enough on the first draft. So this is my favorite error ever, because it happens to me all the time. The most commonly misspelled word is the word EHR. EHR. Because Microsoft Word flips it around like that to make it her. H-E-R. And says, what? But nonetheless, there is an easy fix, as I've been able to figure out with a little bit deeper dive in Microsoft Word, to remove EHR or to explicitly state that EHR should not be corrected to her. And it's pretty straightforward, depends on the Microsoft version you have, but nonetheless, it's there. So you never have to have that correction error in your writing. One problem I see quite a bit, not including enough citations as were requested in the assignment. But pay attention to the instructions and make sure that you follow those requirements. And then one last thought about APA formats. If you have a new source that's different from the other sources you've cited already and you really don't know the proper formatting, Google is really a great tool to find that specific citation form. If you just Google quote APA, no date, author unknown citation, for example, you will almost for sure find several links that give you exact examples of what the APA citation would be. So the use of healthcare with a space or healthcare without a space, to me, is one of personal choice, because our industry accepts both. But in your writing, the local requirements notwithstanding, whichever one you're using, make sure you are consistent. If you start with a space, always write healthcare with a space. And along that topic as well, watch out for incorrect capitalization. For example, healthcare should not be capitalized unless it's at the beginning of a sentence. And if you're using the two-word version, it's only the H that's capitalized, not the C. The rules for proper capitalization, and I'm not here to teach grammar per se, just consider the basic rules, proper nouns, the start of sentences, acronyms most always are capitalized, and so forth, so be wary of that. If we consider the kind of writing that we do for academics very formal, so to speak, and as such, formal writing is not allowed to use contractions, and we certainly don't use slang in formal writing. We really should be writing in the third person, not the first. Don't talk about I, or me. Now, the APA does allow first person writing in really limited circumstances, but it's really not recommended. And even on discussion posts, I would recommend going with a more formal writing approach. Also, we want to try using the active voice, not the passive voice, to improve the clarity of your writing, specifically the subject who's actually doing the action. Tools like Grammarly help us identify those situations, for example. And now I've heard this from many professors. None of us enjoy reading fluffy writing. That is, writing without real substance. The graduate level work that we're doing should be analytical in nature, where we formulate our original ideas and we assess the subject of what we're writing about. We don't really want book reports that are just giving us restatements of the research, but rather we want that information used in our analysis of the content of the topic of what we're writing about. Now, the English language is incredibly rich. There's almost always a word that has the exact precision that you're looking for. But a lot of times we use a lot of words when just one would suffice. So having one or more good thesauruses available to you, preferably online, is a real valuable asset to have to bring precision and quality to your writing. The chances are, when you're editing, you can replace many words with just one if you look hard enough for the precise meaning that you need. I always kind of think of this as making the words matter, making every word matter in the writing. Now, one of the big challenges I see in writing is the use of platitudes. And it's really just a trite or really unoriginal concept or obvious statement that doesn't add anything to the topic of what you're writing about. Like a silly example, I think of, hospitals must do a better job to protect the safety of patients. Well, no kidding. why don't we talk about something that's specific to improving a patient's safety, for example, rather than this overarching kind of generic sentence. And when we go to reduce words in our drafts, these platitude sentences are really the things that I always try to target. If there's not anything really detailed and factual in a sentence, probably a good candidate to be removed or reduced. And since we are here in an academic setting, we really have to consider plagiarism as something that has to be avoided at all costs. And that's why we use Turnitin for the students to double check their writing to ensure there is nothing that is unintentionally inside the paper that shouldn't be. And I strongly recommend that you make heavy use of Turnitin. Make very sparing use of quotes. Professors aren't interested in reading quotes from others as much as we're interested in reading your thoughts. One thing I've noticed is that an entire section of another work might not be copied per se, but the form of the writing is intact in the student's writing because there was a copy and paste, and then that piece of original work was edited within the student's document, changing a word order, substituting words, removing sections, and so forth. So that's something I would really encourage not to do, because you're using the framework of another's writing as your idea framework, and that still is a form of plagiarism. So let's avoid that entirely by not even doing the copy and paste and editing. Let's just write from scratch. Also, on the topic of references, let's be sure not to use references from vendors. All vendors have a perspective, a worldview, and that's not necessarily a source of truth that we can rely upon because a vendor has an agenda to sell something. So we should avoid, wherever possible, using vendor websites and vendor materials as references for our academic work. The references that I prefer, frankly, most often come from the US federal government. There's so many good sources, good websites with material for us to pull in for our papers. My personal favorite is healthit.gov, ONC's site. And in fact, you'll be going there for some interoperability research, I'm sure. But another great site that I use all the time is AHRQ, AHRQ. HHS OCR, Office of Civil Rights, is the go-to source for HIPAA information, violations, and so forth. But there's so many good ones out there. PubMed.gov is another great one for academic papers that you can reference in your materials. And many of these bigger sites have major sub-sites inside of them. Now, something that might not be obvious is the use of older references in health IT class, because information technology evolves rapidly. So we really should be looking at references that are probably no more than 3 or 4 years old, given that the technology changes so quickly. 2 short words on formatting. Pay attention to the assignment requirements. If something says 3 pages, that means 3 full pages. In other words, the text should spill over to a 4th page, or whatever the length of the assignment is, and then spill over to one more as we close out the paper to make sure it's long enough. Also related, do not do crazy margins. We notice. Leave the margin standards alone and just do the writing required to get you there. If I have to get my ruler out to measure, you know somebody's losing a point. Discussion board post is a little bit more serious of a topic. It's really, I think, critical because students specifically learn from each other. From our discussion board posts are supposed to make other students gain some knowledge and insight based on another student's thoughtful analysis. And the dialogue, the discussion, is really meant to enhance the learning and make it more valuable for each student participating. So to that end, we have to pay very close attention to the quality of those discussion board posts. It should be more than 1 paragraph for sure. It should be thoughtful. We have to analyze the topic. You need to really formulate your ideas clearly and then justify your positions based on whatever it is you are advocating. And at the end, just like a mini paper, conclude your thoughts. To that end, replies to discussion board topics should not start with, "I agree with you. What a great post, I agree with you." It's nice to be polite, but what we're looking for are substantive comments. So I suggest perhaps that we start our replies with "consider," and then introduce some new information to the topic that the author of the post hadn't referred to yet. So this way we're bringing more information to the discussion, and we can use it to counter what the original post was, or to build on what the original post was saying, rather than just agreeing with what they said. Say, "Consider this new idea," which augments your point, but I think extends it because now we are going into a different direction, but adding more value to the conversation. No one ever promised that writing well was easy. In fact, it's kind of hard for most of us. And that reminds me of that old Mark Twain quote, "I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so instead I wrote you a long one." Now let's think about that for a moment. What was Twain really saying? And I think the point really is that creating well-written papers and documents, PowerPoints, discussion board posts, even emails, takes time, effort. So we need to budget time to do several drafts to get that long letter down to a short one, as it were. And the more I think about Mark Twain's quote, the more I realized how good quality writing says more with less words. And that's really hard to do. I think you need to be looking for ways to reduce the number of words. Make your writing more precise. And that's one of the great features of Grammarly. And on that topic of conciseness, word precision really helps by removing words, many words, when just one will do. My favorite book of all time is the Oxford English Dictionary. Now, I've never bought the full 20-volume set, but my goodness, the richness of English language takes 20 volumes. And I'm not suggesting you buy the OED or subscribe to it online because it's expensive, but it does illustrate the richness and power of English. There are words that can mean precisely what you want without saying a lot of words to get there. Some more thoughts on the drafts. Probably the most important piece, at least for me, my personal process, is I read almost everything I write out loud. And when I stumble, that means the reader is going to probably stumble too. This means that I read every single word. I don't skim. I don't fill in words that aren't there. I just read exactly what I see. Then I can find the errors more easily because what I'm seeing is not what I'm hearing or vice versa. And that disconnect points me to sections of the paper or the sentences that need work. It's a really, really helpful tool for me. Everything I write, emails, discussion posts, papers, PowerPoints, notes for slides, everything, I try to go through multiple drafts because everything we write has such importance. The main point really is to give yourself enough time between edits so you almost forget the material. Losing that familiarity will prevent you from filling in things that you know in your head that just did not get written to the paper. So my rule of thumb in writing is I try to write much more than what the length should be. As I'm editing down, reducing my word count 20-30% per edit means as I reduce the words, I'm still within the word count or page count that I need to be for the assignment. Now this is my personal approach, but I do find that it works for me, and I hope you can pick up some tidbits for your own process. Last point, make sure that your paper summary catches all your key points. It should mirror your introduction to some extent. So as you close out your writing, you've really made your points clear and concise and persuasive. And a final thought, a little style never hurts. Include a cover page if you can. Make it look good. Why not? Doesn't count in the page count, but the more effort you show in making it look good tells the professor and the readers, other readers, that this writing meant something to the person who created it. Well, packed a lot of information about my thoughts on writing anyway into this short video, and I hope you found it was somewhat useful, at least. If you have any questions at all about any of the topics or want to make any comments, please feel free to reach me at my school email address here, or my personal email address, work-related at least, artofpatientmatching@gmail.com. And of course, the best all-time way to stay in contact and to communicate for professional reasons is through LinkedIn. So please feel free to connect with me there as well. If the video was useful and you enjoyed it, definitely give it a thumbs up or subscribe, because you never know what other topics I'm going to put out that might be of interest. I had a great time making the video. I hope it's useful for you in doing your schoolwork and professional writing, and I'm always here to help. So reach out and have a great day.